Watch this vidcast, or I'll gouge your eyes out.
Welcome back, horror hounds, to Ghostman and Rivera's Horror Show Podcast.
I'm Mike Ghostman Pickle.
And I'm James Rivera.
Horror show news.
All right, Terrifier 2's Indiegogo page reaches their $50,000 goal in just 3 hours.
Danny Boyle announces that another 28 Days Later film is in the works.
James Wan is producing a Salem's Lot adaptation written by Gary Dauberman.
Joe Hill, son of Stephen King, announces new DC Comics horror imprint.
And Annabelle Comes Home hits theaters. First news story we got is a fascinating one from Terrifier 2, which is Damien Leone's follow-up to Terrifier, starring Art the Clown. He started an Indiegogo page. We talked about it, what he was raising it for last couple weeks. He needed to raise money to make really gory scene.
Yeah, it's been compared to the prom scene in Carrie, so it's going to be a scene where Art the Clown becomes a mass murderer. And I guess they already had a budget for this movie, but they didn't have a big enough budget for the ambition they were going for in that scene. And now it looks like they're going to have it after all.
Yeah, and the $50,000 was for the scene. And then once they passed the $50,000 goal, then it became going towards getting a horror icon in it. And I think they've already raised enough for that. So I think they're going beyond that and want to make it like a higher... It seems like it's going to be a higher budget, really gory
So
movie.
It's already reached and far breached what they were aiming for. And it still has, 38 days to go? Something over a month to go?
Yeah.
So I imagine it's going to balloon the budget up a lot, and we're going to see a modern indie slasher with a lot of good production value.
Yeah, and there's still 38 days to go on the Indiegogo campaign. And before the podcast started, it was already up to $116,246. The way Damien Leone describes it is we're aiming to create a scene so shocking and iconic that people will talk about it for years to come. So I think this is one of the most exciting news stories going on in horror right now.
Pretty ambitious, and from what I understand, if you donate to this project, if you're part of the people who raise money, you're going to get a lot of perks. Am I correct?
Yes, here are the perks that are listed on their Indiegogo page. A shout out, you get a shout out in the credits for $10. A special thanks in the credits for $20. Pin a fire, which is it. Okay, when I add a fire on these perks, you can kind of guess what they are. The pin a fire is a pin, Art the Clown pin for $30. Postcard of fire is, of course, a postcard for $30. Mini poster fire is $35. And this is really cool artwork, Terrifier 2 original artwork on these posters and mugs and stuff like that. And Scriptifier is, of course, the script for $40. Shirtifier is a nice shirt with that same design for $40. A large poster fire is $45. And a thank you from David Howard Thornton is $80. That's where he films a video thank you that goes on their page.
That's awesome.
Personalized to you. Signed mini poster fire is $100. A signed large poster fire is $140. A mug-a-fire is $185. Of course, it's a mug. An invitation to a VIP premiere, $1,500.
Now we're getting into the really, really big part of the contributions.
Yeah. And a king for a day is $1,800. That's where you get to go to the set for a day and just hang out. And you also get to slate a couple scenes and yell action.
That's awesome.
When they're filming the actual movie.
Probably a dream come true for a fan.
Yeah. And that's pretty good for $1,800. Extra fires, where you get to be an extra for $2,000. That's a wrap-a-fire for $2,000. That's where you get to go to the wrap party after filming is finished. Executive producer fire is $10,000. That's where you get to be an executive producer credit. You get to have
that's a big budget contribution if you're contributing $10,000.
Yeah. And you get to be on set every day, and you get to contribute. So that's and you get everything else that you get on the other packages, like a signed poster, a signed DVD, and all that. Here are the perks that are sold out.
So this means we can't get these perks anymore?
Yeah.
Ah.
The signed script was $8. There was 50 of those. That's already gone. The Terrifier 2 signed DVD, $85. 25 of those are gone. Terrifier 2 Blu-ray, that was $100. 25 of those are gone. A signed mask was $200. That's gone. Funko Fire, $250. That's one of those little Funko figures of art.
Mm-hmm.
Art's hood was $300. That's gone. Art's gloves was $300. Art's top hat was $400. Some of his murder weapons were $500. The honk, the little horn that he carries, was $750. Various gory goodies, little body parts and gore and stuff, was $1,000. The Art the Clown bust was $1,250. Art's full costume, there was 3 of those, $2,500 each. Those are gone. And Be My Victim for $5,000. It was 6 of those that are gone. That's where you get to be his victim in the movie.
So these people are going to get killed by Art the Clown on screen?
Yeah, so 6 people paid $5,000 to be killed by Art. I bet that's just a drop in the pond for the kills that are going to be in that movie. And finally, the last one is Super Duper Killifier, which is $8,000, and it doesn't have the details of what that is since it's sold out. So I just imagine what that was.
Probably everything all packaged in one or something like that, some kind of big spectacle.
Yeah, and there was just one of those, and that's gone. So that's really fascinating story about this little indie filmmaker who just wanted to make a really creepy killer clown movie, and it just took the horror world by storm, and he's just getting to do everything he wants to do with his sequel, and I just applaud him for it.
I love the fan participation that's part of this. It really makes the fans of Art the Clown, especially the diehard ones who contribute money, it makes them feel like they're part of it or they contribute to it. It's a way for him to reach out to the community of people who made his original film big and make them feel like they're part of something special.
Yeah.
So I commend him for doing this. It's a pretty cool idea, and I'm really looking forward to it. As you know, that's probably one of the best of the modern slashers is Terrifier, and I think Art the Clown is probably our newest, best horror icon, a new modern-day horror icon to go up with some of the great ones in the pantheon.
Yeah, and I can already tell this director, Damien Leone, he loves his fans. He loves the success of Terrifier, and he's just enjoying every minute of it. And he's, like we talked about before, there's that group that started up, the Art the Clown Appreciation Society on Facebook. And
that was started by a fan, correct?
Yeah.
That's not even an official Art the Clown. It's not even officially from the filmmaker himself.
Yeah, but he appreciated it so much, he goes on there and makes exclusive announcements on the page. So join that Facebook group if you're into Terrifier and Art the Clown.
Danny Boyle has announced another 28 Days Later film is in the works. He and Alex Garland have a wonderful idea. We'll see about this because this has been in production hell for like over a decade, and I've been hearing this for a very long time. And this is another one of those projects, almost like Todd McFarlane's Spawn, that we're like, okay, you've been keep talking about this for a while, so I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah, it's been bounced around for a while, and they've been talking about it for a while, but this is the first time, just recently in an interview with Danny Boyle, where he officially started talking about it and saying that they're putting together a cool idea, and it's more than likely going to be 28 months later rather than 28 years. That's all the writer would say, Alex Garland.
Well, I'll check it out. I appreciated 28 months later than 28 weeks later. I mean, 28 weeks later more than 28 days later, I'm sorry.
Yeah. It's much more action-packed type of zombie film, where the first one was more atmospheric, with a little blast of violence.
Here and there. I've always liked Danny Boyle as a filmmaker. Some of his movies don't work for me. I don't like all of them, but overall he's been pretty solid. My favorite movies of his, though, are probably the Trainspotting films. That's the ones that I feel hit closest to home. And I also love Shallow Grave, which is, well, not quite a horror movie. It comes close to being horror. And
I recently watched 28 Days Later, and it really holds up over time and over repeat viewings. For a while, I liked 28 Weeks Later more than 28 Days, but when I rewatched it, I went back to liking 28 Days more. So it's exciting to see Danny Boyle go back to it after leaving it, and then there be a good solid movie done in his absence. So I think he's got a little bit to prove, and also I don't think he would tackle it if he didn't have a really good idea with his writer. And it's good that those two are teaming up. It's going to be good regardless, I believe.
You're listening to Ghostman and Rivera's Horror Show Podcast.
The next news story is James Wan producing Salem's Lot adaptation, written by Gary Dalberman. The only thing they're saying is that it's going to follow Stephen King's novel as closely as possible.
I've actually read Salem's Lot, and it was a really good book, and I like his take on the vampire. He takes it back to more of the Nosferatu kind, and I even discussed it on the History of Horror documentary, where his vampires aren't beautiful or seductive.
Yeah.
They stink of death and the grave, and they're almost like what Nosferatu used to be like. I've never actually seen the miniseries adaptation from the 70s.
Yeah, Toby Hooper directed.
Was it good?
Yeah, I liked it. It did feel slow in some parts, but it was very atmospheric, very scary, and it has that iconic image that always creeped me out. The kid was in his room, and then his friend comes to his door, scratching at it. I mean, he's come to his window at night, scratching at it, and you're like telling the kid, "Don't open the window, don't open the window." And he keeps getting closer and closer. That was a really good iconic scene from the first one, but it really veered far away from the novel, as far, from what I hear.
In addition to the fact that we're kind of in a horror renaissance where it's such a big genre and it's very lucrative and doing very well right now, we're also in a Stephen King renaissance where he's constantly had work being produced based off his adaptations for years.
Yeah.
But it feels like since the past couple of years, we've seen an increase in Stephen King content go up the way that it was in the 70s and 80s and 90s. I feel like this one is ripe for an adaptation that's going to be faithful to it. I have faith as James Wan is producing it. If it's going to be a miniseries, I hope that he chooses one filmmaker to do the entire thing, sort of like how Mike Flanagan did The Haunting of Hill House.
Yeah.
Just so we can have a story with a consistent vision instead of a bunch of different cooks in the kitchen trying to come up with their own disparate ideas.
It's really going to depend on who directs it, because there's a few strikes against it for me. First of all, there was already a Salem's Lot adaptation done with Rob Lowe. Honestly, I watched a few minutes of it, and I wasn't interested in watching any of the rest. It seemed like a very stylized version of it, where Rob Lowe was this vampire killing hero.
So they kind of turned it into a cliche.
Yeah, I don't have much faith in James Wan as a producer. I love him as a director. I'll watch anything that he does. I even love the Aquaman movie, but he's just too inconsistent as a producer with horror films, especially with that Conjuring franchise. And I don't have faith in Gary Delberman either. He's capable of writing a good film. He did write It 2017, and he also wrote It Chapter 2.
Well, then that means he's familiar with adapting a very expansive Stephen King story.
Yeah.
And Salem's Lot actually is not even that long of a book, especially in comparison to a lot of Stephen King's works like It or Under the Dome.
As with anything else in horror, it could turn out to be really good, but...
Well, they have the backbone of a good story there from Stephen King. Let's just hope that they do well with it.
Yeah, I hope he chooses the right director.
Speaking of Stephen King, Joe Hill, the son of Stephen King, has announced a new DC Comics horror imprint. This is what he had to say about it on Instagram. "I'm juiced to be able to finally share what I've been busy with here in 2019. Hill House Comics, a new pop-up imprint at DC where I'm working with some of the best writers and artists in the terror trade to psychologically scar as many comic fans as possible."
Nice.
He also said we have 5 titles coming in the first wave this fall, plus 1 backup feature. First up is Basketful of Heads, illustrated by Leomax and written by your faithful correspondent right here. The first features one of my all-time favorite covers, illustrated by the brilliant Reiko Murakami. The other 4 comics that he has coming one of them is called The Dollhouse. It's going to be from Mike Carey, who worked on Lucifer, Hellblazer, and also wrote The Girl with All the Gifts, I believe the novel that it was based on, and Peter Gross of Lucifer, The Books of Magic, and The Unwritten. Another one is going to be called The Lolo Woods, and it's going to be by Carmen Mario Machado of Her Body and Other Parties. The other one we have is Daphne Byrne by Laura Marks, TV writer and producer of playwright Bethany, and Callie Jones of Swamp Thing, Deadman, and Sandman. So that's some good prestige people working in comics there. And Plunge by Joe Hill himself. The artist is to be determined at this point. I'm actually really excited because I've read so much Stephen King and I have not gotten around yet to Joe Hill. But from everything I hear, he doesn't stand in his father's shadow, that he's a terrific writer in his own right.
Yeah, that's what I hear.
And it's about time we've had a resurgence in more horror comics, because it used to be such a big thing back in the day with the original Tales from the Crypt or The Vault of Horror and other such comic books, which stuff like Creepshow.
Yeah,
There's
I
a
haven't
lot-
seen any horror comics that really interested me in years and years, but these sound really good.
Horror is actually doing fucking phenomenally in video games. There's a big market now for horror video games, so it makes sense that at some point there was going to be a revival in comic books. And as a comic book reader myself, and as a DC Comics fan in particular, I'm really looking forward to these. I'd also like to check out some of Joe Hill's literature before I read it, because I want to familiarize myself with his style.
Yeah.
From what I understand, he's horror, but he doesn't copy his father.
So this is another example of DC diving into horror again. They've been doing it quite a bit lately.
The Swamp Thing and everything. And it makes sense because DC Comics has always been a little bit darker than Marvel.
Yeah.
They've always explored vaguely more mature themes, and their content tends to be a little bit more adult. So I think it's a natural fit. It harkens back to the heyday when horror comics were just as big as superhero comics.
Yeah, those are so awesome in the 60s and 70s. I loved all those horror comics.
This is something I'm definitely looking forward to.
One thing that you might not be looking forward to after I finish telling you about it, Annabelle Comes Home hits theaters this week. It was released on Wednesday the 26th, and in that first day, it was number 2 behind Toy Story 4, so that was $7 million on its first day.
So it made in one day, it made half of Chucky's opening weekend weekend gross.
I actually went to see it, so this is as good a time as any to go into what we watched this week.
Listen to this podcast, or I'll gut you.
Actually, what I did is I went to the theater. It was a $5 day at my local theater. We had a little bit of time this week, just a little sliver of time between editing and filming and writing scripts and all I had to do. So I'm like, I'm going to go check out this Child's Play movie just out of curiosity. I said I was going to watch it for the show. I'm going to watch it for the show. So I show up at the theater, and the theater's a little crazier than I thought it would be. Mm-hmm. I was sitting there waiting in line, and I see that Annabelle Comes Home is coming out, is out too, but it's a later showing. And I'm like, should I go to see Annabelle Comes Home instead of Child's Play? And I decided while I was in line, no, I'm gonna see Child's Play like I said I would. I'm gonna discuss it on the show. When I got up to the box office and I opened my mouth, I said, just give me Annabelle Comes Home at a later show.
So you had a Freudian slip right there. I
Yeah.
think subconsciously, you, especially with everything we talked about, you probably didn't want to support Child's Play.
Yeah.
But from everything I've heard from you, it seems like you wish you would have saw Child's Play instead.
I felt like I couldn't pay for a movie and go see it when I really didn't want to. I wanted to go see Annabelle Comes Home first, and I regretted it afterwards. Oh my goodness. I guarantee you Child's Play is going to be better than that. I had no idea this was going to be this bad. It's Gary Dalberman, the writer. He also wrote the first Annabelle, which is
And we
lame.
just finished talking about Gary Dalberman.
Yeah.
But he's done such a great job with it. I wonder
He wrote Annabelle Creation, which was okay, which was better than the first one, but still not great to me. And he wrote The Nun, and a lot of the problems with The Nun wasn't with the writing, but still it wasn't a very strong script. This one, he just didn't do it for me as a director. The main plot is weak as it is throughout. Mm-hmm. It picks up basically from the first scene in The Conjuring where the Warrens get Annabelle. This movie involves them taking Annabelle back to their museum, closing her up in her case, and then they take off, and then their daughter kind of ends up unleashing the evil of Annabelle. So it kind of conjures up all the spirits that are trapped in that museum. I guess that was the convoluted premise. But that was just weak throughout, and then all the subplots were weak as well. Annabelle hardly did anything, first of all. The scariest thing Annabelle ever did was the girl was there looking at her in her box, and Annabelle leans forward and hits her head on the front of the case. That's literally all that Annabelle does through the whole damn movie.
So would you say this is false advertisement?
Yes. And another way that it's false advertisement is the Warrens are not in this movie. They're in the movie for the first scene to set it up so they can put Annabelle in her case, and then Elizabeth Warren...
I want to return government to the people.
Lorraine Warren says the evil is contained.
You're confusing senators
yeah.
with paranormal hunters. But anyway, proceed.
So I already had a bad feeling when Lorraine Warren stood in front of the case, and it was a build-up to see, Is she in her case? Is she fully sealed? And
Sounds kind of hokey.
yeah, and the camera pulls in close. The evil is contained. I was like, oh no. And if that wasn't bad enough, she says it again at the end of the movie. So basically, they put Annabelle in her case, and they leave and go somewhere else for the rest of the movie, and they don't come back until the evil is all over and done with. I hope it's not too much of a spoiler.
Spoil away.
The way that they beat this evil, somebody in the house, the Warren's daughter, and the babysitter and the babysitter's friend. So one of them gets possessed. And the way that they're exorcised is they lure them in front of a projector and they turn the projector on, which shows a scene from The Conjuring of them exorcising a demon. And
Wait, exorcism by videotape recording?
Yes.
Oh, that sounds awful.
The image of the projector was projected over the person, and she puts her arms up in the air screaming, "Ah!"
That's a cheat. Yeah. That sounds fucking like a complete and total cheat. That's not an exorcism. It's a recording of an exorcism, and that's supposed to work.
It was a way to involve the Warrens in the main plot, even though they were not in the main plot.
So it's a way just to skip out on paying Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga too much money.
Yeah.
Okay, I get it.
So they went so far as, okay, the exorcism by projector happened, all the evil's gone, and then it's the next morning, it's a new day, and the Warrens arrive outside, but you don't see them arrive. You see them go out and greet you. You see them go out the door, and you hear them greet them, and the camera pans over to a picture of the Warrens.
This sounds pretty cheap.
And then she just comes. The Warrens come back just enough for Lorraine Warren to say, "The evil is contained," and that's not even the stupidest part of it. Okay, the boyfriend of
I've heard something about a werewolf subplot, which seems profoundly out of place within the Conjuring, the context of the Conjuring universe.
And the boyfriend of the babysitter comes over, right? Well, it's a boy that the babysitter likes. So he comes over, and it seems like just so they can get him away from the house so the three girls can battle these demons, there's a werewolf chases the guy around town for no apparent reason.
A werewolf? Is this interwoven into the plot in any way?
No, it's never explained. I assume it's supposed to be the werewolf demon. Remember that the Warrens exorcised in one of their stories? I assume it's supposed to be that werewolf demon ghost.
But is it even clarified that that's what it is?
No.
So this seems like it's more inspired by the lore that surrounds the Warrens, and it is based on their actual case files or anything like that. Am I correct in understanding that?
Yeah. And it was just messy direction, messy writing. I didn't care about any of the characters. The girl that played the daughter, she was a really good actress, and it was a good performance by her. It was kind of a wasted on just like a nothing type of movie, just a cash grab, where there was almost nothing interesting about it. And I think it was an insult to use the Warrens in something like this. And I thought the Amityville horror remake was pretty insulting to the original story, but I think this was even more insulting. It's obviously it isn't billed as a true story, but it's the extension of what's supposed to be a true story. Though evil did follow them home, but I believe it was the evil from Amityville Horror did follow them home, and there was some instances there, but there was no werewolf demon chasing any babysitter's boyfriend.
At this point, they're just
damn
trying
town.
to expand it into a cinematic universe so they can make more money, because Annabelle is now something that's apparently very marketable.
Yeah. And I think once word of mouth gets around about this is going to kill the Conjuring franchise. Because they made a huge mistake by bringing the Warrens into a piece of shit like this. Because that taints their reputation. It did for me. Now I'm instantly less excited to see The Conjuring 3 because I've seen a very cheesy, corny rendition of the Warrens, who are involved in some of my favorite stories of the paranormal.
But Conjuring 3 is going to be directed by a different person, and it's a different story, so that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to lessen the quality of it.
Yeah,
I
that's
have
true,
no
but
idea how The Conjuring 3 is going to turn out, but this is just a spin-off thing.
But like this one, I was excited about it purely because the Warrens were going to be in it. Because I was excited to see those two characters in anything. now since I've seen him in something really bad, I'm instantly less excited to see them in anything else. You know what I mean?
So is this even good as like a doll movie then?
No.
So it's
Like-
not even a good killer doll film.
Yeah, like I said, Annabelle does nothing. She has nothing to do with the movie.
Then why is she in the title?
I guess because just
Marketability?
them opening the case, I guess, rustled all these spirits, all these bad spirits that were in the museum, and unleashed them. So it was about all the spirits. But
Then why is it called Annabelle Comes Home?
'Cause
What does the title mean?
Because they bring her home to her case, to where she belongs, to where she stays to this day. So it's basically about when they first bring Annabelle home to the
So
museum.
basically the title's just referring to them putting her into their museum.
Yes, and it's just an opening scene and a final scene.
This just
with the
sounds like
Warrens.
they're just trying to milk the shit out of this franchise at this point.
Yeah.
Any excuse to draw more dollars or more money, that's what they're gonna do.
Yeah, and the opening scene.
I could have predicted this though. This does not come as a surprise to me, to
Yeah.
be perfectly honest.
The opening scene had a lot of the Warrens and Annabelle together. So half the people in the theater, it was a pretty packed theater. Half the people in the theater were taking pictures of the screen, and at least 3 people had their flash on. So you had flashes on the screen, and I was literally, by the end of the movie, I was hoping people would start taking pictures of the screen and flashing, because that was more entertaining than the actual movie was.
That's weird because in most situations, that type of behavior in a movie theater irritates me or pisses me off. It's like, dude, we all paid for this fucking movie.
Yeah,
Don't be flashing your damn phone. Put that shit away.
and I longed for it by the
Yeah.
end. And everybody was quiet by the end. There was a couple of people that tried to clap, but it was futile.
Please clap.
So I can just imagine what's going to happen when the word of mouth of this movie comes out. So that's what I thought of Annabelle Comes Home.
Well, I actually rewatched something that I hadn't watched in years, and that was John Carpenter's adaptation of Stephen King's magnificent novel Christine. And I'm glad I rewatched this movie because I watched this once years ago, and I rewatched it not too long after I had finished reading Stephen King's novel that is based on. And as far as that goes, Christine is one of my favorite Stephen King books. It's one of his most underrated books. It doesn't get the credit it deserves, and it has one of the most touching friendships I've ever read in any book period, not just in the horror genre.
Yeah.
And the book, it revolves around a pair of friends, one popular, one's not. The main character's named Arnie. He's really unpopular. And his best friend basically takes care of him, looks out for him and everything because he's popular at school, and the other is a nerd that's always getting picked on. And he falls in love with this shitty looking car, and starts to fix it up, and it turns out that the car is possessed by some sort of evil. And in the book, it's kind of strange because it's such a ridiculous concept if you think about it, a haunted car. But the book really, really sells you on it because the human drama and the human relationships is so real. The portrayal of high school life, what it's like to be in high school, the way that kids act with each other, the way that teenagers are, is extremely realistic. How moody they are, how they're always pining, the way that they're very dramatic. And the friendship in it is so well etched out, and it etches the friendship all the way from childhood all the way into high school, where the movie just starts in high school. So the first time I'd seen it, I felt like I just watched a rushed version of a novel that I absolutely loved, and it kind of turned me off to the adaptation.
Because it was so fresh after reading it.
Yeah, and I've generally had bad experiences when I've read a book and then watched the movie immediately after. I feel like it's better if I let some time separate it and let it sink in as the novel sink in as its own thing before I start consuming it as in a different form or at adaptation. Much to my surprise, I fucking loved it this time. I thought it was a really good movie. If you remove it from the context of the book, I had to understand that this is a film and you can't put into detail everything that's in the book. The relationship is actually really well done. The romance in it is actually pretty convincing for the most part.
Yeah.
And it's very atmospheric. A lot of it reminded me, and I didn't notice this the first time, but a lot of it reminded me of Halloween. The stalking scenes when Christine is lurking in the background and you see those beautiful widescreen compositions. It reminded me a little bit of Michael Myers lurking around in the neighborhood waiting to attack. The kill scenes are pretty creative because, for one, it's a car.
True.
It has a magical ability to repair itself. And I was just really impressed by it. I also really like the performance in the film by Harry Dean Stanton, who plays the investigator, the great Harry Dean Stanton.
Yeah.
He's probably my favorite character in the movie in the way that he handled that situation. But I really enjoyed it a lot this time, and I felt it was a very fleshed out film with very believable relationships that made you care. And it had a fantastic score. It reminded me also of Halloween, that fantastic John Carpenter score.
Yeah.
And then the soundtrack with the old songs really did it for me this time. So I was really happy that I had a chance to rewatch this film because it was much different seeing it again after all these years.
Did you feel that it lacked detail that you wanted?
Yeah, I think so. I felt that it lacked depth in the relationship, and I was like, it's only lacks depth in comparison. And you got to keep in mind, they're so different. There's a couple things that the movie does miss out on for me. These are things that are not translatable. In the novel, when Stephen King describes the attraction that Arnie has towards Christine, the evil car, it's almost poetic, and it's almost it's something that doesn't translate, that you can't necessarily put into visuals.
Yeah.
It's only can be perfectly conveyed by Stephen King's words. In the movie, you don't get the sense of how I mean, they do try to sell it, and you do get kind of a sense of the power it exerts over him. But in the novel, it's a lot more believable, and there's a bit of poetry into it, the way it's explained how Arnie's attracted to this car because he believes, and they say it in the movie, but it does not have the same effect the way that Stephen King writes it in detail about how he likes the car because it's uglier than him, but he feels like it's something that he can actually fix up and change. Regardless, there's some things that I feel get lost in the translation because just the book itself is absolutely wonderful and takes a premise that on its surface shouldn't work and makes it a very human and very touching story about friendship and loss. And I think that the movie overall does a really good job of adapting it while adding John Carpenter's stylistic twist on the Stephen King story. So much better film upon rewatch. Now, before I could see it as a highlight of John Carpenter's career.
And having not read the book, I do believe the drama is effective.
Oh yeah, it's very
movie.
effective in the movie. It's
and
just
his sense of alienation and his obsessiveness with the car.
But there's a poetry that comes across in the book where that expresses the alienation and the frustration in a way that's hard to translate cinematically, that works so well coming out of Stephen King's style of writing. So overall, though, really good film, and I'm glad that I rewatched it and had a reevaluation of it. Now that I've had time to let I've had time to let the novel pass by, and now I can digest it and appreciate it more as its own thing.
Because that's one of my favorite Carpenter movies, and I couldn't believe for a while that you didn't enjoy it, and so I'm glad you watched it again and found a new appreciation for it. Yeah,
much different take on it. That was one of my 2 watches this week. It was a rewatch that I've been eager to get back into because I've always loved that story. And there's always been a nagging part of me that feels like I never gave it the right chance just because the context I saw the film under the first time.
Yeah.
Good movie.
The second movie I watched this week was much better than the first. Mm-hmm. It's also got a supernatural element to it. The Hole in the Ground. It's another creepy kid movie, that's an oversaturated subgenre.
Creepy kid films?
Like you said, it's more like a trope to have these kids turn evil.
Or be creepy. Yeah, it's not really a subgenre. It's just a genre trope that's extremely common.
Yeah, but this one is done really, really well. Really solid film. And it's directed by its first-time feature filmmaker, a writer-director. It's an Irish writer-director, Lee Cronin. Mm-hmm. So I'm definitely looking forward to what this guy does next. And his 2 stars, the one that plays the mom, Sienna Kerslake, and the one that plays the kid is James Quinn Markey. They're both Irish actors. They just killed it. And from the opening scene, within the first 2 minutes, I was immediately drawn in by the visuals, the cinematography, the acting, the music, the atmosphere, everything. And it had one of those classic driving into danger scenes, just like in The Shining, where it's these big wide scenes of some family members going into the woods and it being like, you can tell there's an impending doom. But that was a really great depiction of that type of scene. That this movie took a lot of familiar tropes in this type of movie and just did them really well to the T. It was really impressive throughout, and it never lost me throughout.
So it wasn't necessarily original, but it was a well-executed version of something we've seen before.
Yeah, and it did have enough twist at the end. Like, I won't give too many details, but it does go from being a creepy kid movie to being like a Descent, like a claustrophobic horror type of thing with creatures. They tell the story through the dialogue that I guess the mom has left her husband, and she tells the kid that we're moving off to this remote cabin in the woods, and your father will be along later. So when the father doesn't show up, the kid gets mad, and he runs off into the woods. So she runs off to chase after him, and she loses him, and she gets to this big, huge sinkhole, just a big hole in the middle of the woods. And beautiful woods, by the way. I don't know if it was the way they were photographed or the woods themselves. I think it was a mixture of both, but just some of the most beautiful woods I've ever seen in a movie. But it was this big sinkhole, so she immediately starts to panic that her son's in that sinkhole, and then he appears behind her. Oh, thank goodness. And the movie takes off from there. So when he gets home, he's kind of not himself. So you get the idea that maybe he went into the sinkhole and something else came out.
Interesting.
So it was a really subtle buildup of his creepiness, and is really effective. It seemed to ratchet up the tension just right as it went along. It didn't get too overly creepy or overly ridiculous. It's just real subtle creepiness and tension creeping in. It was made more intense by the mom having dreams of stuff like him breaking a guy's wrist or something like that. And there was this really cool dream sequence in which she was watching her son sing in a school play. And while she was listening to him sing, like his singing got slower and slower and more creepy. And then his voice isolated where you can only hear him in the room and you couldn't hear the room noise. And then the next thing you know, all the crowd disappears around her, and then all the kids disappear around him. So they're been in this auditorium with just her in her seat and the kid up on the stage. This really cool scene, and it kind of adds to the tension of him growing more and more creepy. And it was really saying it's not giving away too much because it shows it in the trailer. There's this really cool scene where the kid's really creeped out. It shows how creeped out he is by spiders. Mm-hmm. So she hears him making creepy noises in his room, so she kind of looks underneath the door, and she sees a spider crawling across his floor. And then she sees his little hand creeping up behind the spider, and he's making gestures with his hand as if his hand is another spider. And he reaches and picks it up. And then she goes up and looks through the keyhole, and he sits on his bed, and he's eating that spider. So that was another really effective scene. One of the really creepy things about it, I don't think I've quite seen this in a movie before, the way people would be found dead. They'd be laying face down in the woods, and a little hole is dug by their head, and their head is shoved down into the hole and dirt thrown on top of it. And there was this one scene where they find this lady in the woods like that, face down, like I said, where their head like abnormally kind of down in the dirt, and these ravens are like pecking at her flesh. And it was really, really good, really effects.
Sounds deliciously gruesome.
Yeah. So like I said,
I don't think I've ever seen that before in a movie. I mean, I've seen people kick heads off into holes while the head's over, but I don't think I've ever seen the head still on the body but buried in the ground.
And I've told you just about what I could tell you without giving too much away, but there's a lot of stuff that I can't tell you that
would ruin the experience of watching it for the first time.
Yeah, so there's a few things that are really good about this movie. I think it's well worth the watch. So
do you think this redeemed your experience with Annabelle?
Yes, I think I enjoyed it even more because it was so much better than Annabelle Comes Home. I just had a smile on my face the whole time because I was like, this is what it's like to watch a new 2019 horror movie that's great. So I highly recommend The Hole in the Ground.
Tune in to Ghostman and Rivera's Horror Show podcast, or I'll slice your fingers off.
I actually did another first-time watch. As our listeners know, I've been trying to binge everything I've ever missed in horror. And I watched the 1975 made-for-TV film Trilogy of Terror, starring the great Karen Black. And I've known about this film for years, and I've seen the image of the doll that's in it, of the little voodoo doll that looks like an indigenous warrior with a spear. And this is actually something that I've been wanting to watch for a long time because my grandfather, who passed away last year, used to always talk about this film and describe it so much, the way that the doll would go screaming, like the noises it makes, the how wild it is. I even kind of knew how it already ended because my grandpa had described it. So this is a movie that I've been hearing about so much since I was a child, described in my head, that I kind of knew what to expect. So I was not disappointed. I thought it was really good. I loved Karen Black in this film.
Yes.
And she plays 4 different roles. Yes, she plays 4 different roles. And just to be clear, this is an anthology horror movie. The story with the little possessed doll, the voodoo doll, is only one of 3 stories, and it's probably the most iconic or the most notorious part. Yeah. What surprised me is that the other 2 stories were actually pretty good as well, and all of them feature Karen Black in really good performances. The first story I really liked because it kind of struck me as kind of surprisingly modern and touching on subjects that are a little bit touchy now, kind of especially in the Me Too era. Yeah. It's a story that's about date rape and how this person takes advantage of this woman and tries to blackmail her. And it's actually a pretty skeevy story for a while, and you feel sorry, but then you realize that this is not what you think it is, and the tables are turned, and you realize that what you thought you were seeing is the exact opposite. So it's a story that really pulls the rug from underneath you. And Karen Black really sells it, though, is what sells the twist on the story. And I really liked her performance in that. I also liked the second short story, which I believe was Melissa. I don't know how to say their name, Melissa and Therese, where Karen Black plays 2 sisters, one who is very sexually loose and described as having seduced their father, and the other one is very proper and very, I don't know, seems kind of repressed and kind of prim and seems older than she actually is. And Karen Black plays these 2, the great Karen Black, she plays these 2 characters and makes you and sells them that they're 2 completely different people.
Yeah, very effective.
Very effective, but the twist at the end of it works. And then the third one is just the icing on the cake for me. It was one of the best examples of a crazy little doll I've ever seen in a horror movie. And I was a little bit skeptical about it at first, because even though I've heard about it a lot, I was like, this is 1975. This is before Child's Play. And Child's Play was pretty groundbreaking in its time, because there had never been that type of advanced puppetry when it came out. So this was years before they advanced that technology. And what surprised me is how well that they used the doll. It didn't seem like a doll come to life. It seemed like the doll was fucking attacking or moving. Yeah, it seemed like a little plastic doll was moving. It didn't look like it was like... You know how in a lot of little doll movies, when they come to life, they become more imbued with facial expressions and they take on more human characteristics? This doll didn't, and it just runs at you furiously and fast and opens its eyes and makes a lot of crazy sounding noises, and it's extremely visceral. It's funny, it's visceral, it's horrifying. Karen Black sells the terror, and at the end there's this really great image with Karen Black that I don't want to spoil it if you've never seen it before, where she's just staring into the camera in a certain pose, and I thought it was just an awesome piece of iconic imagery. And it really impressed me for being a made-for-TV film in the 1970s.
Oh yeah, definitely, yeah.
It doesn't seem like that at all. And it was actually written by Richard Matheson, who's actually used to write a lot for the Twilight Zone. He wrote one of their most iconic stories, Nightmare at 10,000 feet or 20,000 feet. I really enjoyed it a lot. It was directed by Dan Curtis. And it's really the Karen Black show at the end of the day, because she's tasked with playing 4 completely different characters, arguably 5, if you've actually seen it. So I don't want to say arguably 5. And she nails on all fronts. And I can see why she was such a big horror icon and why she made such an impact in the horror genre, especially in the 70s. So much so that Rob Zombie eventually cast her as Mother Firefly in House of a Thousand Corpses.
Yeah, that's a perfect example of why she's so great.
Yeah.
And why she's such a horror icon.
Like I said, all the stories were creative. The last story was the best. It was visceral, but everything about it was pretty clever, pretty atmospheric, and cleverly told. I'm glad I'd finally seen it, and I really recommend it to anybody who hasn't watched it yet.
That's a great one. We have to do a Killer Doll show one time where we discuss all the Killer Doll movies, because that's one of the best ones.
Child's Play. Yeah. It definitely falls under the Killer Doll subgenre for me, because even though only one of the 3 stories it's the main one, and there's a reason that story comes at the end. And I be honest, not just the quality doesn't just surprise me for being a made-for-TV film. The subject matter surprises me, especially with the first story with date rape. That's a pretty touchy topic, and they put that in the film. I was pretty surprised that they would do this in a made for television 1970s film.
It's pretty scary, pretty intense for a TV series, TV show too.
TV movie.
TV movie, yeah.
Yeah. Well, we're about to play another round of Tubi TV Roulette.
Horror show exclusive.
For the past few weeks, we've been concentrating on doing a lot of in-depth discussions, and it takes a lot of time and effort to research. And we had an extra busy week this week with filming and editing. So we're going to take it easy on ourselves and play some games this week. And the first game we're going to play is Horror Tubi TV Roulette.
So basically, Tubi TV is a free app on Amazon Prime. You can watch movies for free. It has a few commercials on it. And they have an extensive selection of horror films. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go down and randomly pick a horror film. I don't know what it's going to be. It could be good. It could be bad. There's a lot of awful stuff on here, and there's a lot of good movies on here. So I'm about to play Tubi TV Roulette. Whatever I land on, I'm going to have to watch for better or for worse.
And just to let you know, the last time we played Horror Tubi TV Roulette, James won and I lost. I got a bad movie and James got a pretty good one.
So let's see if fate tips in another direction now. I'm going to start.
Okay, it is scrolling. You point at the TV.
So 10.
Where
9,
it stops, no one. Ooh,
8,
I see some good ones
7,
going by.
6, 5. I'm not brave.
In a Dark Place.
In a Dark Place. What year is this movie from, Mr. Michael?
2006 horror film. Anna V takes a job as a nanny for 2 young orphans. Her new workplace is a remote country estate with beautiful grounds.
Well,
and it's with Lily. Isn't that Lily Sobieski?
Yes, I believe so. So I have never seen this film. I have never heard of it. I have no idea if it's going to be good or not. But I am excited. It's always fun to see what we have. So now it's your turn, Mr. Michael. Are you ready to roll the dice?
Yes, and it's no fair to start from here because the more you go down the line, the worse it gets. So just in case I pick the same one that James got, I'll pick another one. So let me get back to the beginning first. So you passed some good ones before.
Very unfortunate.
Okay, we are back at 1. So I am going to roll the Tubi TV roulette wheel.
All right, let's go.
See what I get to discuss next week. And we are scrolling. And let me see. Okay, I almost seen it in the reflection. I can't see what I'm... Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. What did I land on?
Pumpkinhead, the 1988 horror film.
Yes!
I actually really love this movie. And I have not seen it since childhood. It's something that stands out a lot for me from my childhood, and I'm fucking jealous that I didn't land on that.
I scored already. I got a good rewatch, so hopefully yours will be good, James.
I hope so, too. Well, that's Tubi TV Roulette. We're going to review these respective films, on our podcast next week. And hopefully, I enjoy mine. We already know Michael's going to like his.
Yeah. And while we got the TV on, why don't we play one more game on the TV, which is...
What the hell is on American Horrors? As you know, we have a weekly television series, if you listen to our podcast. We broadcast every Friday around 6:30 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. Central Time. And however that translates to the rest of the world, 8:30 Pacific. So this is the channel that
it's actually 6:30 Pacific and 8:30 Central.
I apologize. So this is the channel that we appear on. So with American Horrors, it's just a horror-based channel run by Hart D. Fisher, the king of serial killer culture. And you never know what's going to play on this channel because it is so fucking random. And he has the most obscure horror and exploitation movies that air on here, and they look like old VHS tapes. And
if you miss the beginning of a movie, if you miss the opening title sequence, then you have no idea what's going to be on. So it's kind of fun to turn the channel on and try to figure out what's on.
Like an old pirate TV station. You ready to turn it on, Mr. Michael?
Yeah, so let's play What the Hell is on American Horrors.
Horror show exclusive.
The great channel that our show, Pickle's Horror Show, is on. So check out AmericanHorrors.com. And also check out all the details of our show. We got one more episode left after you hear this podcast. We got one more episode left this season, and we will come back for our second season September 13th. That'll be Friday the 13th, so stay tuned for that. And now we're going to try to figure out what the hell is on American Horrors. Okay, some guy's getting his ass choked. They're in a movie theater.
It seems like they're watching this on the television screen. There's a girl jumping out of the window while people are watching her.
I don't recognize anyone yet.
With a lot of these, a lot of the times you can start recognizing films and placing them just based on the fact that they might feature some horror icon in them. So all you got to do is do a little Google search. For some of these other stuff, it's really hard to see what it is.
But every time you turn the channel on, it seems like somebody's being choked or ravaged or beaten or shot or cut.
Some of the material, the content that airs on here is borderline pornographic.
It's uncut, let's put it that way.
There's a very freaky looking woman who's making a face right now.
And blood's coming out of her eyes.
And this girl is standing up in the middle of a movie theater.
So the horror is no longer just on the screen, it's in the theater. And everyone in the theater looks dead. What the hell is
Popcorn is being spilled as a symbol of horror. The girl jumps over the seats.
Everyone in the theater except for this girl are some kind of zombies.
Either that or they're zombified because they don't really look like they're very lucid or in it.
So it looks like a real modern movie theater.
Yep. All you need is the smartphones out.
Yeah.
And then you would get an approximation of going to the movie theaters now.
And people taking a picture of the screen with their flash.
Yep. Well, I'll be damned, Michael. I don't recognize anybody from this, so I don't have I have no way of placing what this actually is. I have no idea what we're watching.
So it looks like we lost this round of what the hell's on American Horrors because we can't recognize what this is, but we will find out what it is from the great Hart Fisher, and we will put it on the page. Yeah. Week. Well, all these people are going after her.
Oh shit, this reminds me a little bit of Scream 2, the opening of Scream 2 where she's getting trapped in front of the movie screen.
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of Demons too, where all the patrons turn into demons.
I think I mentioned we don't really see too much movie theater horror. Well, that's about it. We can't figure out what exactly this is.
But we will figure it out later. But at least there's some cool shit going on when it came on.
That was to our little games that we play here, TUBI TV Roulette and What the Hell is on American Horrors. Now, before we close our podcast out, Michael has something for me, another segment we call Horror Homework. And during this segment, Mike and I assign each other films that we know that we have not seen so we can analyze, break down, and have a conversation about them. So what is your horror homework for me this week, Michael?
The last horror homework done by me was Bride of Chucky, which I enjoyed, and we had a nice little discussion about it. So this one I'm going to give you this week is Session 9, directed by Brad Hamilton, starring David Caruso from NYPD Blue and various other movies.
And why did you pick this film to show me of all of the ones that you know I haven't seen, Michael?
It's actually, when I was looking for movies to give you for horror homework, I was extremely disappointed when I seen this because I realized that I missed bringing this up on the scariest movies I've ever seen. It's definitely one of the scariest. It's a group of men led by David Caruso basically clean the asbestos out of this old building. And the building's haunted and it starts manipulating the men. Tension grows between the men, so you're dealing with the tension between the men and their psychological... being manipulated psychologically by whatever spirits in this building. So I really look forward to hearing your thoughts on Session 9.
All right, I'm looking forward to it. I'll check it out.
And that's about it for this week's Ghostman Rivera's Horror Show podcast. So keep up with us on our page at facebook.com/Pickles Horror Show and also on Instagram at Pickles Horror Show. And like we said, we got one more episode left after you hear this podcast, which is next Friday.
We just aired, actually, on Friday, our second to last episode of the season. And the second to last episode of the season actually featured a short film from both Mike and I. I wrote and directed a short film starring our very own Susie Block. and a great upcoming actor named Nick Thurr called Misogynistic Losers. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you missed it, it's going to be re-airing again on Sunday on the American Horror Channel sometime between Gorecasts. And on this episode, we also had one of Mike's short films, The Campsite. And this one is part of our segment called Horror Hound Theater with our very own Sydney Pickle, where she does kind of a Joe Bob Briggs thing where she breaks down the film. She explains what went into it. It stopped a couple of times, and then we have some details and some facts about the behind-the-scenes production of the film, and it's called The Campsite.
And without even realizing it, we put those two shorts together on that episode, and it just so happened to be your second short film, and it was my second short film. And I must say you did a very good job on your second short film, writing and directing.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Michael.
And you pulled some great performances out of our two actors, and I loved every minute of it. So if you missed it,
I appreciate that.
if you missed this episode, you guys check it out on Sunday. Every time we play a show on Friday, they rerun it on Sunday around the same time.
And if you want to see it and missed it, it'll probably air before our season finale, which is next Friday. We usually air the rerun of the week's the episode from the week prior.
Yeah.
Our season finale is actually going to be our Ghostman Rivera special. It's our last episode of the season. We're going to have some actually podcast highlights from this very podcast that you're listening to right now. We have interviews with Sid Haig and the director of a Serbian film on there, as well as a short little short film, basically a mock documentary created by our very own Gargoyle Media.
Yeah, called Apple a Day, about a killer doctor.
And Mike and I also star in another micro short, and I'm not going to reveal what it's called or what it's about, so you got to tune in and check it out. We're going to be going off the air to regroup, re-energize. We're going to come back a lot better, a lot stronger. We've gotten progressively better, I feel, as the season has gone on. We've learned a lot with our editing, writing, directing, producing. I think we've improved greatly, so we're going to come back bigger, stronger, and better than ever on September the 13th, which is actually Friday the 13th. So look out for that.
And this season, we haven't had a lot of collaboration with Gargoyle Media, but it was mostly playing their short films that they already had previously created, and plus Joaquin Silva helping us out on camera, and he saved us with this season, and he really helped us make it the quality that it is. So I attributed a lot of its popularity to him.
Yes. And I also want to be very clear, this is our television, our variety or horror variety show features short film skits, event coverage, interviews, highlights from this podcast. We're going to keep this podcast going every week, even when it's off the air. So just because our show isn't running doesn't mean that you're not going to hear from us. So tune in every Saturday. As you already know, we're on Apple Podcast and SoundCloud. We're going to be coming to Spotify really soon.
Yes, and I'm very excited for season 2 of the show because we're actually going to collaborate and do shorts together with Gargoyle Media instead of just airing theirs. So I think it's really going to get a lot better with that extra voice, those extra voices and collaboration.
Next week, we'll have a more in-depth podcast. We know this one is a bit shorter than our normal podcast. We usually go into a lot more detail, but next week, we'll be back to our normal full-length podcast scheduling.
Yeah, we haven't made a final decision on what our topic will be, but it'll be something like creepy kids, and we got a Stephen King discussion coming up, and we're going to eventually discuss werewolf movies and various other subgenres and directors and actors, so stay tuned. And we're also going to have guests coming up, which is Adrian King from Friday the 13th and Caroline Williams from Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. And the video of those interviews will be featured in season 2 of the show. So stay tuned for that.
All right. Until next week, happy horror.
Happy horror, everyone.